How are you, church? Good. Y'all doing well today? Yes. Is that warm weather got everybody running ragged? Because I am. I mean, we played all Friday, Saturday, and it's just been wild at the house. Everybody's planting gardens. I got offered zucchini plants and cantaloupe plants when I got here this morning. I got some extras you want to plant. I'm like, guys, I ain't even started yet. I ain't had time. It has been beautiful. I wanted to say something before I get into the message this morning. You may have noticed over the last several weeks we've had the baptism tub sitting on stage all the time, and there's a reason for that. We've talked a lot about it as a staff, and we're changing the way that we do baptism a little bit, and this is how it's going to go from now on. If you're interested in baptism, if that's something that you feel like is the next step for you, you tell us you want to be baptized, we're going to do it. We're not going to wait for a special Sunday. We're going to, as soon as you're ready and you're wanting to do that, we're going to do that. And I'm telling you that because if you're out here this morning or you're listening online and you say, man, baptism is the next step for me. I want to go public that I am a believer in Jesus Christ and that He is Lord over my life and that I am following Him, then here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you in the tub as quick as possible, okay? And this is what we talked about. This is what we talked about. When we have somebody who is willing to do that publicly, they want to publicly say, man, I'm following Jesus in my life, we're going to stop anything for that. Everything stops for that. And so I just want to say that to you because I want you to know that that's where we're at. So all you have to do, and there's a bunch of ways you can do that. You can grab one of us on staff. You can stop by the Connection Center, just put your name in, and we'll give you a call. But we want to do that for you, okay? And we will try our best to make sure the water's warm. That's about all we can promise you, So anyway, oh man, I'm excited to talk to you this morning. We began a new series this past Sunday where I have the absolute privilege of sharing what I love about Jesus. And it kind of was born out of preparing for the Easter service, and I just got to thinking about it, and I just realized this is what I was supposed to do. I was going to take a few weeks here and just talk to you guys about everything that I love, not everything, but a bunch of the important things that I love about Jesus. And getting to know Jesus has been the greatest endeavor of my life. I mean that. It has been the single greatest thing that I have done in my life. It has helped me in more ways than you can imagine. It's changed me in infinite ways. It has moved me to be who I am today. And it's filled my life with all the good stuff, right? Is that what y'all have experienced? All the good stuff. As a matter of fact, anything good that you see in me, I mean this, anything good that you see in me is Jesus. That's really what it is. I have a friend, and we were riding down the road one day, and he and I had never really had a conversation about his relationship with God and what he was feeling and kind of where he was. And so one day we were riding down the road, and I just asked him, I said, man, tell me, where are you at in your relationship with God? And he started talking to me, and he was very honest. We have a good relationship. He said, man, I just don't know. I don't know where I am on all that. I don't know how, I don't know how to talk to him. I don't know where I'm at, but I like hanging out with you. That's what he said. He said, I like hanging out with you. I don't mind listening to you talk about Him. I don't mind, hearing your thoughts on God. And I mean, but I just love being around you. I love the way you are. I love, da-da-da-da. And I said, well, I want to tell you something. That's something you need to know. Anything that you love about me is Him. I said, whatever goodness you've seen come out of me, that's Jesus. And that's literally what getting to know Jesus has done in my life. Well, whatever good you see in me, that comes from Him. And so we started this series in the hopes that as we learn more about Jesus, maybe it'll fill our lives with even more good. Maybe it'll bring even more good out of us as we get to know Him. All right, so to do that, though, to tell you the next lesson that I believe I learned about Jesus, I need to tell you about someone in the Bible. I need to tell you about their relationship with Jesus. I need to tell you about their experience with Jesus because in their life and in their relationship with Jesus, I believe this lesson is very visible. The man's name is Simon Peter. Y'all know Simon Peter? Raise your hand if you heard of Simon Peter in the Bible. Okay, good. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Peter is definitely one of my favorites. He's one of my favorite people to read about in the Bible because he's just so normal. He's just such a normal guy. A lot of times when he says things or he does things, it reminds me of something that I would say. It reminds me of a question that I would ask. I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible because I did background on him just a couple months ago when I told another story about him. So I'm going to try to make it quick. Peter was a normal guy, like I said. He was a commercial fisherman by trade. So he was around men all day. He hung out with men all day. He was on the water at night. You know what I mean? That's what he did. They fished at night typically. And so he's kind of a man's man. He's opinionated, stubborn guy. And when we're first introduced to Peter in the Bible, Jesus is calling him to be one of his 12 disciples. And Peter is at his workplace on a boat in the morning. They're coming in from fishing all night, and they have gotten thoroughly thrashed by the fish. They caught nothing. And as they come up to the shore, Jesus is there. He's teaching with a crowd of people, and Jesus asks to use the boat. So they kind of pull the boat up where he can stand on it, and he talks, teaches, and then Jesus displays his power in front of these fishermen by telling them, hey, push the boat out a little bit, let's throw the nets over, and let's catch some fish. And they're like, what are you talking about? We don't catch fish this way, we don't do it this way. But they did it. And it says when they threw the nets in, they pulled, that there were so many fish in the net that it almost capsized the boat, that they couldn't get all the fish into the boat. And it amazed them. They couldn't believe what had just happened. They knew that it had to be a miracle. That there had to be something special about Jesus in order for him to have power, the authority to do that. So from the bow of that boat, heaping with fish, Jesus issues a request to Peter and a couple of these other fishermen. You know what it was? Follow me. And Peter accepted. Peter accepted, and from there, Peter would travel with Jesus for the next few years, and he would bear witness. I think this is safe to say, he would bear witness to the ministry of Jesus Christ and probably witnessed more miracles firsthand than anybody else has ever lived. He witnessed Jesus do more crazy things. I'm talking about lame walking, blind seeing, people being raised from the dead. Peter got to see it all. And Peter kind of became the unsung leader of the disciples. And he asserted himself kind of in a way of being passionate. He was the vocal guy in the group. He was the risk taker. He's the one that jumped out of the boat, walked on water. He's the one that asked, the hard questions and sometimes some dumb questions like which one of us is the greatest. He helped lead the group though. Peter was all in all the time. And this is one thing you need to know about Peter. Multiple times in the Gospels as you read, Peter would say, Jesus, I love you the most. I love you more than all these other guys. I love you the most. Which is kind of, whatever to say, right, Ann? But he said it. He said, I love you more than everybody else. Everybody still with me? Y'all good this morning? Good. Probably the most important thing to note about Peter was the fact, though, that Jesus believed in him. Jesus did. Jesus believed in Peter. He had huge plans for Peter. As a matter of fact, Jesus told Peter one day, he said, one day, Peter, I'm going to be gone. And you're going to lead the church. I'm going to use you to build my church. You'll be my rock. He said, your faith and your words, your faith in me and the words that you say and the words that I give you is going to draw people to me. And Jesus affirms Peter over and over through the Gospels, and from the beginning of the relationship all the way to the end of it. He says, man, you're going to be a fisher of men. I'm going to use you. You're going to be the rock that I build my church on. This is what he was saying. Peter, I have great big plans for you. Peter, you are going to live an extraordinary life. I'm going to do incredible things through you. I'm going to do great things through you. Peter heard these things. He listened to Jesus all the time, and Jesus was always encouraging him and always telling him all these things. So Peter knew my life is going to be much different than just being an old fisherman, right? Jesus got big plans for me. But whenever Jesus would talk about, the fact that he was going to be gone, that he was going to be leaving, that he was going to die, it just seemed to go right over Peter's head. And the other disciples too. It just went right over the head, didn't it, Scott? You read the Gospels, you realize these guys just didn't get it. They were thinking like, oh yeah, I know we're all going to die one day. They're thinking of it that way. And maybe Peter even thought, well, I would never let something happen to you. Or maybe he thought because Jesus was who he said he was, that God would protect Jesus. But it just seems like they never understood it. And so headed into the last week of Jesus' life, Peter was there. And Peter was right beside Jesus. He was excited. He thought things are going great. And as they enter Jerusalem, remember that we talked about on Easter Sunday, they enter Jerusalem, Peter was there. As they go and they meet the Pharisees, and Jesus allows himself to be questioned by the Pharisees, and they do all these things, Peter was there. And then headed into what we call the Last Supper, which is Jesus' last meal with his disciples. Peter was there. After 3.5 years, here they find themselves. And Peter was there, and they're eating this meal, and Jesus all of a sudden looks over at Peter, and he says, "Hey, Peter, mind yourself, boy. You better pray your heart out. Because pretty soon, things are going to get bad. And Peter, when they get bad, you're going to deny even knowing me. You're going to deny knowing me." Well, Peter, he was like, "Psh, psh, what?" He said, I would never do that. I've told you I love you more than the rest of these. I would never deny knowing you. Jesus said, "I'm telling you, Peter, you are. You will deny even knowing me." Peter said, "There is absolutely no way I would ever deny knowing you." Jesus said, "I tell you what's the truth. Before the rooster crows tomorrow, you will have denied me 3 times. You will deny even knowing me 3 times when the rooster crows." Peter wasn't having it. He just didn't believe it. It's not possible. I would never do that. As a matter of fact, just a few hours later, when they came to arrest Jesus, Peter tried to prove his resolve. When the soldier showed up, he pulled his sword and he cut off one of them's ear. And I guess he was probably going to hack some more, and somebody stopped him. You know who it was? Jesus. Jesus stopped him. He said, "Peter, whoa, what are you doing? This is not what we're doing. This is not what this is about. This is supposed to happen." And Jesus stops him. And it's right here at this moment where we see the first inkling of separation between Jesus and Peter. Because when we're told, as they exited the garden and these guys were taking Jesus, they had arrested Jesus, and they were going to take him and kind of put him on display in this area. It says that Peter followed at a distance. That's what we're told. Peter was following at a distance. Word spread that Jesus had been arrested. And over the next several hours, a crowd began to gather around the area where they were keeping Jesus. And as that crowd began to gather, it wasn't long before Peter was recognized. And Peter was accused of being, "Hey, you're one of those guys, right? You're one of those guys that was with Jesus. You're from Galilee. You're one of those guys that's been with him this whole time as he's been traveling around Jerusalem teaching everything." 3 different times, Peter was recognized and accused. And do you know what he did all 3 times? He denied him. First time they said, "Hey, you're that guy, right?" Peter said, No. I'm not from there. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not him. I don't know this Jesus guy. Second time, I don't know him. Never met the guy. Third time, listen, I cannot be, I don't even know what you're talking about. I've never even heard of this guy you're talking about. And it said that in the third time, that as he denied Christ, when it came out of his mouth, the rooster crowed. And it says in the Bible that Jesus looked at him as he said it. And Peter looked at him. And they made eye contact. As soon as the words came out of Peter's mouth, he couldn't believe it. He heard the rooster, and he looked at Jesus, and he realized, I just messed up. I did exactly what he told me I would. Peter was crushed. And it says in the Bible that he ran away and hid. And as you know, Jesus was crucified the following day. And I would assume, though it's never really mentioned specifically, I would assume that Peter was probably watching at a distance at least or something. But Peter knew what was going on. And he watched as his friend, his teacher, his mentor, and his Lord that he had called him was murdered. Now, real quick, you're Peter. Okay? Y'all know I like to put you in a story every once in a while. You're Peter. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? I failed. We failed. How in the world did this happen? Everything was going so good. Why did I get so scared? The last memory Jesus is going to have of me is the fact that I denied even knowing him. The last words Jesus heard me say was, I don't know who you're talking about. Peter knew. I completely let him down. I hurt him, and now he's dead, and we're all scattered. It is over. Right? It's over. Luckily for us, we know the whole story, right? What happened 3 days later? It would have appeared as though it was the case, and that in fact it was over for Peter. But 3 days later, Jesus rose from the grave. In Luke 24, we're told that Peter, when he heard that the tomb was empty, we're told that Peter ran to the tomb. I love this little part of the story. Peter ran to the tomb, and he gets there, and he finds the tomb empty. Right? He was excited to hear the tomb was, but he gets there, and he says the tomb was empty. And as he turned to leave, he looked at what was laying there and everything. As he turned to leave, this is what it said. It said he wondered to himself what happened. This is old human Peter, man. I'm telling you. This is just what he does. Peter's leaving. He's going, man, I wonder what happened. Jesus told them boys like at least a half a dozen times, I'm going to die and I'm going to be resurrected. And you got Peter going, I wonder what happened. You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? In the days following Jesus' resurrection, to the best of my knowledge, what I was able to study, Jesus appeared to different groups of people several times. Okay, so he would come back, and his resurrected form was in some ways similar, but in some ways different. You can tell by the interactions that he had with the people. But in at least two of these occurrences, from the best I can tell, Peter was in the room. Everybody still with me? Peter was in the room. And there's something I couldn't help but notice. But I want to be careful here. Because I don't want to say something incorrect. I just want you to gather the same information that I've gathered. You have to be careful when you're basing something off of something, when you're basing something off of the absence of information. Does that make sense? So we're going to base something off the absence of information. But this is what I want to say. I know that Peter was in the room for a couple of these meetings. And this is what I say. In the 3.5 years leading up to Jesus being crucified, every time just about that Peter was in the room, Peter did something, or Peter had something to say, or there's a mention of Peter, it's just who he was, right? So Peter always was engaged in what Jesus was doing. Like we said, he was a passionate follower of Jesus. In these two occurrences where we know Peter was in the room with Jesus and the other disciples, nothing. Not a word. Not a question, not a thought. There's no mention of an embrace, nothing. Jesus shows up, he's talking to his guys, nothing about Peter. Can I tell you what I drew from that? It made me wonder. I wonder if Peter was feeling some shame. I wonder if Peter was feeling some guilt when he saw Jesus. I wonder if Peter was going, you know what, my place, my position in this group as the spokesman and one of the leaders and the doer, I forfeited that when I denied knowing him. I wonder if Peter thinks, those plans that Jesus had for me, all we were going to do, how he was going to use me, and that extraordinary life that he had for me, I think all that's gone. I think those things are over. Even with a resurrected Jesus in front of him, Peter he just wasn't ready. In one of those meetings, Jesus instructed his disciples to meet him on a mountain near Galilee, and there he was going to kind of address all of them and kind of tell them some of the things that he wanted to tell them all. And it's there, the disciples head there, and I don't know, there's a little bit of discrepancy about this just as far as what we're able to understand, but when they get there, some of them wait and some of them don't. And that's where we pick up in a little story right here I want to read. Read John 21, verse 3 with me. It says, Simon Peter said, because they're near the Sea of Galilee, I'm going fishing. I'm going fishing. We'll come too, they all said, which is about 6 other disciples that are with him. I just want to pause for a second because Peter gets near the Sea of Galilee. I think he's feeling a lot of different things about his situation with Jesus, his place and his position and the plans that Jesus had for him. And he's looking, and I think he just goes, I'm going to go fishing. I don't know whether Peter's returning to his old way of life, if he's planning on going and, I'm going to start working for a living again. Or I don't know if Peter was just like, I'm just going to go out here and do some fishing. I just need to get away. I just need to get away and go do my own thing for a minute and think. I don't know if he just thought, man, I just need the peace and calm of just being on the water. But they go fishing. Read the rest of it with me. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. That sounds like every Danny Pelfrey fishing trip I've ever been on. I ain't gonna lie to you. That's what it's like. Danny's really got to redeem himself with me, yes, man. They didn't catch a thing. And at dawn, they're headed back to the shore, thoroughly beaten by the fish, and they look to the shore, and there's a man standing there. And as they look and see the man yells out the question that every man asks other fishermen that he sees, and that question is, "Did you have any luck?" I do it every time, guys. I'm not kidding. If I'm swimming with the kids on a dock and a boat comes by, I'm like, I don't care if their motor's running, I'm like, "Hey!" I don't know why I need to know that. I feel like a 60-year-old man. He says, "You have any luck?" They said, "No, we didn't catch a thing." Then he says something very familiar. "Lower your nets overboard where you're at for a catch." I think they all look at each other. I think the wheels are turning, They throw the nets in the water. And they're loaded with fish. It says John looks, John knows. John goes, "It's the Lord!" And no sooner than he says it's the Lord, all of a sudden we see a glimpse of the old Peter. It says he grabs his tunic, because I guess he had his tunic off for fishing, working. Grabs his tunic, puts it on, and just steps off in the water. And just starts half swimming, half running to the shore. It says they were about 100 yards offshore. He gets there. And it doesn't say this, but in my mind, it's what I see. I think he grabs Jesus and hugs him. And then poor other boys, they're having to haul the net in. They're having to do all the work. And they're trying to get the boat to shore. And they're getting everything and getting the net there. They just drag the net to shore. And Jesus looks at Peter and he says, "You got any fish you'd like to cook?" He already had a fire going. And he already had some bread sitting there. So Peter runs back and he grabs a couple of the best fish, I'm sure, and they take it and they get them ready and they start cooking. And it says that Jesus sat there with his boys and ate breakfast with them that he cooked for them. After breakfast, he turns and looks at Peter. And this is what he said, verse 15. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Sound familiar? Do you love me more than the rest of these guys do? Do you love me more than them? Compare your love for me to these other disciples. Do you love me more? Do you love me? This is what he's saying. Do you love me as you've always said you do? Yes, Lord, Peter replied. You know I love you. You know I love you. Then feed my lambs, Jesus told him. You know what Jesus is saying? To go tell people about me. Go teach people about me. Go tell people who I am. You know what he's really saying? Then go do what we've talked about for the last 3 years. Proceed with the plan, just as we've talked about. Verse 16, it says, Jesus repeated the question. I think Peter's just sitting there just looking at him, just like, are you sure? I mean, I don't know. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. Go take care of people. Go take care of my people. Teach people about me. Tell people about me. Help them. I need you to follow through with the plan. Y'all still with me? Verse 17, a third time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question the third time. You know what I think happened? I think Peter's getting emotional. Because there's a lot being said between them that's not being said. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Then get on with it. Do what we talked about you doing. Answer the call that I've been calling you for all this time. Proceed. I believe there was some finality in this third time. Jesus asked the question and Peter answered. I believe something happened inside Peter. And we can call it forgiveness or we can call it closure. But this is really what I think. I think Jesus was closing the book on 3 horrible failures. 3 professions of love to correct 3 acts of denial. I love the way Jesus did it too, because it wasn't just between Peter and he did it in front of the other disciples. You know why? Because the disciples knew what had happened. They had probably heard or seen, or Peter had talked about it. So Jesus wanted to do that in front of them. He wanted them to see that this is the guy that I am entrusting to build my church on, that I want to feed my sheep, that I want to tell people about me. He's one of them. And I want you to see that me and him, we're okay. That he's forgiven. Jesus was ready to see Peter do what he had always planned and envisioned for him. And then Jesus gives his final instruction to Peter. Do you know what it was? The end of verse 19. Follow me. Let's go back to doing exactly what you've been doing this whole time. Which brings me to what I love about Jesus. Because this is exactly what I love about Jesus. Jesus cares more about our future than our failures. You listen to me. Jesus cares more about our future than our failures. Jesus cares more about seeing us move forward than He does on dwelling on the mistakes we made. I can't help but notice that in this story, Jesus seemed determined to get Peter past his failure in order to get him moving towards his future. When I read Peter's story, I think it's easy to see that Peter was hung up on his failure. I think Peter had made a terrible mistake. And I believe one could presume from Peter's actions that he had stalled out. He didn't know what his place was. He didn't know what the plans were for him. He didn't know how to continue on. He didn't know how to continue the work. I think he was gone fishing in the very literal sense. He was gone fishing. Jesus had told him in the beginning what his future held. Jesus had told him, here's what you're going to be doing. Here's how I'm going to use you. I've commissioned you. I'm prepping you. And I'm going to push you to be the disciple that you are. And then Peter fumbled it. Fear took over his mind, and he made a bad decision. He lied, he abandoned Jesus, and he saved himself. Peter, the one who said he would die for Jesus, denied even knowing him. He failed miserably, and he failed publicly. People saw it. And people heard about it. And this failure led Peter to believe something untrue. He believed that because of his failure, that all of his future and all of his plans, all of Jesus' plans, they were kaput. They were no longer applicable to his life. He believed that there was no more to be done for him. His failure had to mean that his future, that extraordinary life that Jesus had planned for him, that it had come and gone. It was over. There was no way forward. There was no way past what he did. There was no way that you could come back from a colossal failure like that. How could Jesus use someone who failed that badly? Why would Jesus want to use someone who flaked out when the pressure got high? Why would Jesus want to use somebody so weak, so sorry? That's not the kind of person you can use to build your church on, right? Jesus wouldn't. Peter believed there's just no way Jesus would want to use me after that failure. There's no way I can go forward with him after the way I messed up. Peter could not have been more wrong. Y'all still with me? Peter could not have been more wrong. Jesus was more interested in getting Peter headed towards his future than he was on dwelling on his failures. And that is exactly what I love about Jesus. Jesus' plans for Peter hadn't changed in spite of his failure. Jesus still wanted him to experience an extraordinary life, still wanted to use him, still wanted to see Peter make a difference in the lives of people around him. Jesus still wanted to lead Peter and be as close to Peter as he ever had before. All of the preparation hadn't been undone. The future that Jesus had planned for Peter stood, and it stood firm. I want to say this, because I don't want you to mishear me. Jesus wasn't oblivious to Peter's failures. He acknowledged them. I think by asking Peter 3 times, he was acknowledging. I think there are probably other things that were said and done that we don't know about, that Jesus acknowledged his failures. But his interest was in forgiving Peter and moving on. He knew what Peter was going through. And Jesus had one question to get him going. Do you love me? Because if you love me, then we can get going. Jesus wanted to deal with them and get them out of the way so he could head towards the future. And here's the thing. That's exactly what Jesus wants to do with you. That is exactly what Jesus wants to do with you. Someone in here this morning, you're in a hard stall. Some time ago, you had a colossal failure. And it was so bad, and it was so hard and ugly and public or whatever that you just hit pause. You just hit the pause button. Somewhere along the way you messed up, and since then you have quit moving forward. And you stopped moving forward because your failure made you believe something untrue. You thought, because of your failure, that you didn't deserve to continue on in life. You didn't think that there was more good for you. You didn't think there was an extraordinary life for you. You thought Jesus' plans maybe were all messed up for you now because of this failure. Because of that, you haven't pursued a stronger relationship with Him. You haven't pursued Him using you anymore. You haven't pursued any of those things. You just hit pause on life and said, this is where I'm staying. I messed up. It was bad. It was ugly. It was terrible. And I'm just gonna hang here in this circle pattern for a while. I'm gonna go do some fishing. You think because you cheated, you divorced, you got fired, you crashed financially, you went to jail, you fell off a wagon, you messed up something royally, or you've just been hanging back for so long. There's just not more for you. There's no more plans. You think because of one of those things that Jesus has got nothing else for you. You couldn't be more wrong. Do you hear me? You could not be more wrong. Jesus, He desperately wants to see you moving again. He has every intention and plan to use you and to bless you and to be with you just like He was before. Every step of the way. He has an extraordinary life still planned for you because you're still breathing. He cares way more about your future than He does your failures. That's the truth. He cares way more about your future than He does your failures. So the question is, you say, well, all right, Tim, then what do I do? What do I do? I'm looking at my life and I hit the pause button just like you said. I know the failure. I can think of the failure. I know how I failed. I see it. I see it. This is where I'm at. This is exactly where I'm at. So what do I do? Step one, you need to have a conversation with Jesus. You need to ask His forgiveness. If you haven't already, and you probably have. But you need to ask His forgiveness. You say, Jesus, I messed up, and this is what I did. I'll tell you, He'll forgive you just like that. He'll forgive you just like that because what He's interested in is getting you moving towards your future. I think you need to ask yourself this question. You say, well, how do I do that? Let me ask yourself this question. Do you love Him? That's what He asked Peter. I'm not going to try to outdo Jesus here. Do you love Him? Answer that question honestly. Do you love Jesus? If you do, then that's enough. Then ask Him what's next. Say, forgive me, and what's next? What do you want me to do next? What is it you got planned for me? I want to get re-engaged in what you want from me, Jesus. That's what I want. I want you to get me back on the move forward. Have a conversation with Him, just like that. That's what you do. Let me pray for you. Father, I want to take my time this morning. I don't want to be in a hurry. There's somebody here who experienced a real failure. And it was significant. And it hurt. And it hurt in a way that I can't begin to understand for them. I don't know what it is, and I don't need to know, but they know what it is. And they recognize that because of that failure, they hit pause in their relationship with you. They hit pause on their life. For whatever reason, they began to believe some things, and they just said, you know what, this is as far as I can go, as far as I'm going. I'm going to be happy to just be around. I'm going to come to church some. I'm going to still, be, a good person and be the best person I can, but I'm just not expecting this to go any farther. I'm just going to hang back. I'm just going to be quiet. I'm just not going to really put myself out there anymore because I don't want to insult anybody, and I don't want to insult Jesus by taking my failures and trying to go forward. Jesus, I want you to speak to their hearts right now and just tell them that stuff is a lie. That's just lies. And it is robbing them. It is robbing them of seeing all the good you can do in them, all the good you can do in their life, and all of the difference that they can make. The work that you had planned to do through them, because I know this about you, it still stands. You still want to use them. You still want to bless them. You still want to bring your plans into light in their life and show them how great their life can be and how extraordinary it can be. So, Father, this is my prayer. I pray that they have a conversation with you, and I'm going to give them a chance to do that right now, to do a couple of things. I want them to answer, do you love Him? Do you love Jesus? If you do, then ask His forgiveness. Ask His forgiveness for that failure. And you do that simply. You say, God, I just want to be forgiven. Here's what I did. Here's what it was like. You know what it was like. You saw me. You saw the decision I made. You saw the mistake that I made. I want to ask you to forgive me for that. And God, I want to believe with all of my heart that as I ask you to forgive that it is over. It is done. It is finished. It is taken care of, and it is forgiven. And then I want to ask you this question, God. What is next then? What is it you want to see me doing? What moves am I supposed to be taking? What steps am I supposed to be taking in my life? How do I rekindle that relationship with you? How do I step forward in those plans that you have for me? Because, God, I want to get moving. Father, I'm thankful for each person that said that prayer. And this is what I pray. However we can help them as a church family. However we can help them as a church family. I want us to help them. And I'm going to do something because this is a good Sunday to do that. Real quick, I want you just, if you're in this room or you're online, however you can do it, I want you just to take a quick little glance around the room, and I want you to pick somebody, and I want you to pray for them. Just a quick glance and go back down to praying. And I want you to pick somebody random, pick somebody that you don't know, and pray for them. And pray that God will tell them what's next for them. Maybe they didn't pray that prayer, but tell them, I want to see us moving forward. I want to see us following Jesus and growing in Him. So pray for that other family. Pray for that person. Father, I'm thankful for Jesus. I'm thankful for everything that I've been thinking about for the last couple of weeks here, everything that I love about Him. I'm excited to teach about Him and tell people who He is, because all the good stuff comes from Him. It's in Jesus' name. Everybody says, amen. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Do me one favor. If you prayed for somebody, tell them that you prayed for them. I'm telling you, it goes a long way. Do that. I love you. See you. Get out of here.